have bigger chunks of corn in my crap.
The PVM 6041QM is Sony's smallest RGB Pro monitor, and for its size it packs a punch, handling 15kHz composite, component and RGB. I already had a slightly larger 9-inch PVM, and I admittedly bought mine as a novelty, but it soon found its way onto the trophy shelf of doom, where classic consoles are laid to rest.
Forever. 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 Forever.
But this little guy deserves a showcase of its own, and I wanted to see for myself if a 6-inch RGB CRT has any real use for gaming and beyond. 6 inches is actually the diagonal measurement of the entire tube, whereas the viewable area is only 5 inches, which makes sense that it's also called the 5041Q in other regions. So to give some perspective on the size of the screen, it's less than twice the size of the Analog Pocket's 3.5-inch screen. These screws hold the aftermarket plexiglass cover that I bought from a fellow CRT enthusiast, who had a limited supply made a little while back. You might have noticed the dark shade, and I was told by the seller that the original cover had a slight tint, and this was the lightest they could get fabricated unless going clear. I can see in RGB Rob's video of his new old stock 6-inch PVM that the original tint is much more subtle than the reproduction. The contrast needs to be turned up all the way to get the colours to pop through the cover, which could theoretically shorten the life of this CRT if I used it more. It has fewer buttons on the front than 9-inch PVMs, which means you don't need to crack the DaVinci Code to select the desired input. Moving on to the back, and some buttons that are normally on the front of PVMs have moved over to this side for sync, RGB, component, and 16:9 underscan. There's the vertical hold dial that you can adjust in case the set scrolls vertically. These were intended as field monitors, so to make them completely portable, they have a slot for a 12-volt battery, and these NP1B batteries cost almost as much as the monitor. Plus, new old stock would surely be depleted by now, and I'd be interested if anyone 3D prints a housing for one. RGB and component share the same inputs, and given that this is a miniature version of its larger siblings, there's no room for RGB outputs, even for audio. To hook up consumer video and gaming equipment, you're going to need BNC to RCA connectors, and for RGB, then a pass-through female SCART adapter. It'll take most types of sync, apart from separate HV sync, so no need to worry about stripping the video out, and also no concerns about attenuating sync voltage, because it'll take TTL level C sync. This monitor, as well as most 9-inch PVMs, won't display any signal when it doesn't have sync, which is odd because pretty much every other CRT will roll a garbled image, but this PVM only shows black. So if you're looking at buying one of these and the seller states that there's no picture, check for the appropriate sync setting given the video source. An unrelated fact that I discovered when filming the loss in sync is that a DS light will turn off when brought in close proximity to a magnetized CRT. Just thought I'd share. S-video gets omitted to save space, but we can fix that. I couldn't think of any scenario where a console can only output S-video and not composite. But if for whatever reason you do need it, then you could passively combine Luma and Chroma. I tried this out using an S-video breakout cable that I made for an Atari monitor. I bodged in the 1 nanofarad capacitor for Chroma using a breadboard and combined the two signals using the monitor's composite input and output. On this small screen, it's harder to notice the slight loss in sharpness and some blue banding on the combined S-video signal. The peak-to-peak voltage is within a safe level, and if you try this yourself, don't expect S-video quality on a composite input. It's just combining the signals externally for an inferior result. The remote port with an 8-pin DIN connection has a slightly different pinout to the 9042QM. It's missing the tally light, so pin 5 is spare. If the buttons were ever physically damaged, then making a custom cable wouldn't be too difficult to restore certain functions. It's as easy as connecting the desired pin to ground to simulate a button press. The mono speaker is located underneath and it's facing down, where sound can either be muffled if sitting on a soft surface, or kinda tinny on smooth surfaces. But the 10-degree elevation lets the sound travel unimpeded. Of course, the main intention of the stand is for better viewing and not better sound, and if looking dead on, it's a much needed improvement. Taking a look at the internals, and it's apparent why Sony made these monitors so long to cram in all the boards. The CRT's neck stops about halfway until there's the power supply, followed by the input board. The swivel bracket that holds each board is pretty flaky. I hadn't even touched the inside before I found pieces of broken plastic. On the left is the deflection board with a cluster of potentiometers for geometry. With no on-screen display and no service menu, all adjustments are manual. Each of the pots are labelled, and the service manual also elaborates further. On the side is the B board with RGB bias and gain pots. Having color calibrated a PVM 20L5, I wouldn't touch these dials unless necessary. The anode cap is fixed into place, and seeing the PVM that Weeb Labs tore down, this looks like an intentional factory measure. As the degauss button was emitted, I went digging for the coil, seeing it wasn't there when I inspected the internals. And there it was, wound up on top and behind the bezel. For the amount that Pro monitors sell for today, I know some people that game on a nice consumer CRT and then own a more affordable but smaller PVM as a way of dipping their toes into Pro monitors. Although if this was me, I'd be a little underwhelmed, which would have me on the chase for something bigger. At 250 TV lines, you can easily see the aperture grille. And 250 might sound low, but at only 6 inches, that's actually a fair number for a colour set. Still, it's not going to give you those big fat scan lines that you'd see on larger Pro monitors with higher TV lines. If you can overlook the slight difference in brightness, at this size, Composite looks almost indistinguishable to RGB. I can somewhat gauge my ideal field of view by the 24-inch 4x3 image on my daily driver. Looks like I'll be moving to the desk. Text is plenty readable at 240p and 480i in 60Hz. I grew up with good old flickery PAL video, and I'm not perceiving any flicker in 480i 50Hz. So the image is bright and crispy, and it's certainly playable at a reasonable distance. But if I have to take a console out of the setup just to play a game, I'll realistically never use it for gaming. So I'm taking this back to the couch for the ultimate battle, the PVM versus the power of sight. Alright, so point proven. You can theoretically game on this from the couch, but you honestly won't see any of the details that make retro games so charming. You'd be doing yourself, the developers, and hell, even the PVM a disservice not sitting as close as possible when gaming. So then this should be my portable CRT of choice when I have a gaming meetup? Well, I already have a 14-inch CRT that isn't an inconvenience to carry, and pretty much outperforms anything smaller in every way. So then what other uses do I have for a 6-inch PVM?
Security!
You'd need a 9-inch monitor to knock out a man like Dwayne Johnson, so it's not ideal for home security. But it should be effective against a small child. As a prop, they make for some sweet eye candy. And I don't have the time to record long play sessions, but I could see this PVM being a hit on streams. It's a perfect test bench monitor, where all you really need is an analog display to test out consoles for repair. Keep in mind though that it's almost as deep as a 9-inch PVM, so I wouldn't seek this one out if you've already got one, as it won't save you any more space. As a portable reference monitor, this set could have helped me pick up the off-whites of the PVM 20L5 at the time of purchase, and saved myself the hassle of color calibrating. You just need to loop the composite video of the PVM into the next monitor for simultaneous output. It's a hell of a lot more convenient than lugging around a large monitor just as a comparative reference. An overlooked use for the monitor in the digital age of technology is exactly its intended purpose: video production. When digitizing my family's home movies, I've learnt the importance of calibrating the scaler to an analog reference, because some color details are misrepresented on the FrameMeister's analog to digital conversion. This way, I can shift the brightness and individual colors to match the source material. And toggling the PVM's underscan button helps me reference the viewable area to adjust the FrameMeister's scaled picture. The PVM 6041QM is a sleek piece of Sony's history, initially intended for commercial use, and now making their way into the hands of hobbyists like myself. I have a new appreciation for its uses beyond gaming to complement the hobby, and with a new perspective of how one can benefit from such a tiny PVM, I think it'll spend less time on the shelf of doom and more time as my go-to reference monitor of choice.
Do-ba-dee-doo.